Hey guys, what's up? Uh, it's Friday. There's some Torchlight gameplay, and usually I'm drinking coffee, but today I'm drinking a Monster, which is fairly appropriate because I'm going to talk about monsters in this Torchlight video. Specifically, one monster, the king of the monsters, Godzilla. Yesterday would have been Thursday, May 15th, and I went to a early screening of the new Godzilla film, and honestly, the trailers from the first trailer with the Halo jump and like the quick, like blink and you missed it shot of Godzilla, I've been pumped since. So I was pretty hyped up going into this movie, and I was really hoping it was going to live up to my expectations. And that being said, I don't think my expectations were as high as everybody else's because really all I wanted was a movie with some decent substance and big giant ass monsters fighting each other and destroying shit. So before we get too in depth here, um, I want to talk about first. I'm not going to do like first the negatives and then the positives. I'm just going to kind of roll here with everything. The first thing I want to talk about is the cast. I'm a huge Bryan Cranston fan. I've liked Bryan Cranston since before Breaking Bad, and I was very excited that he was in this. And without giving anything away, he is great for the time that he's on screen, just like he always is. But he's very underutilized, I should say. Um, like I said, the moments that he is there are good, and he shines just like he always does. But he is very underutilized. That's just my take. Apparently, a lot of people kind of feel that way. Also, Ken Watanabe, awesome as always. Again, underutilized. He's got more screen time than he did in, say, Batman Begins, but and he is a major plot point. He is a major plot centered character, but his halfway through the movie, his character kind of stalls out a little bit. Then it picks up, and then uh, his deal in the whole movie does feel like it reaches a conclusion. Unlike Bryan Cranston, where I kind of felt like his character doesn't reach like he reaches like his storyline is concluded, but it's just not satisfying. But that could be because of my preference for Cranston. Uh, Elizabeth Olsen is underutilized. She's not in the movie as too much, but I think that was kind of a waste of some potential there. We'll see what happens when she's in the Avengers. Which also leads me to Aaron Taylor Johnson, who I don't want to say he was terrible. None of the acting in the movie was terrible. I will say that I think personally Aaron Taylor Johnson was by far the weakest link. He's just kind of boring. You know, he doesn't have that leading man quality. And like I said, I mean, it wasn't that he was bad. He was just kind of stiff and boring. So it'll be interesting to see. Excuse me. It'll be interesting to see how he does as Quicksilver in the Avengers. But you know, he was in quite a bit of the movie, and it just kind of as a movie. Not only do I think he was the weakest link in the cast, I think he was the weakest link in the whole movie compared to everything else, both visually and just with the cast and the acting. But you know, that's just me. Also, another negative is the movie. I think might actually be a little too long. The pacing's pretty good in the beginning, but the middle kind of bogs down a little bit. Uh, but it's not completely boring. It's just I felt like couple things here and there were off. And I guess they removed some scenes to help with pacing. I'd kind of like to see what those scenes are like once they're put back into the movie. I don't know if there'll be like a director's cut or an extended edition or whatever, or if they'll just be deleted scenes on the Blu-ray or what. But there was a couple things that they just kind of browbeat you about, and might have carried on a little too long. The one thing I did like though is talking about the humans. They didn't make. My worry was partway through the movie, once the shit hits the fan, is the American army or military gets involved and takes control of this. I don't want to say takes control of the situation, but they get involved in the situation and they take Ken Watanabe, his character, and Sally Hawkins' character work for a company called Monarch that have been monitoring these, well, mainly Godzilla at first, since 1954. And they kind of come in and are like, we're taking over. And I'm like, oh no, here we go. This is going to be a American military comes to the rescue thing again. But, you know, the whole thing is they've been keeping, there was the Pacific nuclear tests in the 1950s were actually attempts to kill Godzilla, and they obviously failed. But then they found these spores, and they took one had hatched, and they weren't sure like what went on, but it went to Japan, and it was actually feeding off the radiation from the nuclear power plant that Bryan Cranston works at, which then causes the plant to melt down and be destroyed. And that's the catalyst for Cranston's character to try to uncover this conspiracy that he thinks is going on. And there's another creature that ends up emerging, and these creatures feed off of radiation, because the whole kind of subplot with these monsters is they back in the primeval times when the Earth was first formed, you know, it was more radioactive than it is now, and Godzilla and these other creatures, they fed off the radiation that the planet was giving off. And these creatures are apparently parasites to Godzilla and his species. So once these creatures emerge, that's the catalyst for Godzilla's return, because they're a threat to him. So that's how they set up everything and kind of make him this anti-hero to save humanity. So these Mutos, they call them, the designs were kind of cool. They had one that could fly, and they had one that was a bit bigger. It was about the size of Godzilla, like 300 and some feet tall. It couldn't fly. The designs were nice. There was times they did look a little CG, but you know, whatever, it is what it is. Overall, the visual effects were very well done. But you know, you had these Mutos wreaking havoc as they try to converge, because one was a male and one was a female, and they wanted to breed. So the issue they were having was these things give off like an EMP, like they have like an EMP bubble around them almost, like you could say. So like obviously anything electrical wouldn't work or anything like that. So they're wreaking havoc as they try to converge so they can mate. And Godzilla's swimming through the Pacific he's hunting, chasing after them. And the military's following them to see what's going on, and they devise this plan to try to take out all three of them at once, and yada yada yada, and it doesn't work. But the first major set piece, as far as the action, the monster on monster action, is in Hawaii, where the male shows up. He is eating the reactor for a sub that he pulled a sub out of the ocean, and he's feeding off the radiation from the nuclear sub. And Godzilla tracks him to Hawaii, and they have They fight, but you don't really see a whole lot of it. Um, there's the big reveal for Godzilla and like a full body shot, and then it cuts away, and most of the action is seen on a news report. Then, everything settles down there, and it flies off, and he gets back into the ocean, swims after him to San Francisco. Meanwhile, the female Muto is making her way from Nevada to San Francisco. Once they get to San Francisco, that's basically when all hell really breaks loose, and you have your big Godzilla versus the Muto fights, and there's some stuff with the military. That's where the Halo jump takes place. And that whole sequence was pretty stunning. The visual effects were done really well. A lot of action. The actual fight between Godzilla and the Mutos was pretty cool. Like, there was a couple moments where I was one in particular that I'll talk about in a minute, but there was one moment that was pretty cool, because it was just like, oh, that he when he takes out the male Muto, just the way it's shot, and it's just like that was awesome. That was what you were waiting for. And then there's a little bit of a lull. We go back to the humans, and then Godzilla shows up to finish off the female Muto, and the way he finishes her off, I'm not going to get into spoilers about it, but the way he does her in was just, I want that shit. I want a screenshot of that, and I want it as my background, because that was the coolest fucking thing I've seen in a movie all year so far. Like, I was like, when he did it, I was just like, fuck yeah, that was cool. But so the set pieces are really well done, and there is some spectacular visuals in the movie, and there's just these moments where it's just like, that's awesome. I mean, like, the kid in me was just like ecstatic and giddy. But I'm of a mixed mind of this. There's not a lot of Godzilla in the movie. They do focus a little bit heavier on the Mutos for a bit than they do on Godzilla, mainly because he's just swimming across the ocean. And like, the nerd in me is kind of like, I want to see more, But the other part of me is like, I'm kind of glad they didn't just like plaster him all over the screen for 2 hours. They used, because then when he did show up, it was much more impactful. But at the same time, they did a lot of cutaways, just like as the action was starting to get good. Oh, they closed the curtain. So there was a bit of a cock tease there with a lot of the reveal shots, and not showing you these big beastly brawls between these monsters. And like I said, it's kind of a letdown, but at the same time, it's like, I get it, I understand why they did it, and it did, and at least for me, it worked, because like I said, when you do get to finally see the action, it's that much more awesome. Also, when I was a kid, I saw Jurassic Park in the theater, and my issues with the difference between the movie and the novel aside, Jurassic Park is still one of my all-time favorite movies. And I think what a lot of people fail to realize is, in the original Jurassic Park, the total amount of time that you see dinosaurs on screen, I think, is like 15 minutes. It might even be less than that. And that's, that movie's in the ballpark of 2 hours. And I think with credits, Godzilla's 2 hours and 3 minutes. And it's longer. He's on screen more than probably 15 minutes. I'd say, might be generous assumption, but there might be a half hour total of screen time that Godzilla's on the screen. But it works. because, like I said, with Jurassic Park, you had that 15 minutes of dinosaurs. So when the dinosaurs did show up, it was just like, whoa. Um, and that was the same feeling I got watching this, 20 years later. And it worked. It worked. I mean, they didn't blow their load too early in the movie, and they didn't overuse him to the point where it was like, oh, he's back. It was just like it at least gave me the feeling like, yes, he's back. They're going to show him, and he's going to kick some monster ass, and it's going to be fantastic. So I mean, like I said, though, some people I could see. I think I'm not going to discredit the people have a valid complaint about him not being on screen a lot, but because I would have liked to have seen him on screen more, but at the same time, I felt that the way they did it worked perfectly fine too. Also, I'm not like a huge Godzilla nerd. I haven't seen every Godzilla movie ever made, and so I mean, I'm a fan of what the monster is and what he stands for and his history and all that, but I'm not like this devout Godzilla fan. Also, the one thing I do want to address is some of the, I don't want to say controversy, but there's been some discussions about, is he fat? The original Godzilla, and don't hold me to this is just rough estimates. The original 1954 Godzilla was, I think, like 150 feet tall, somewhere in that ballpark. And this one is about 200 feet taller than him because, as they said, skylines are a lot higher now than they were in 1954. So if you had this 150-foot Godzilla walking through San Francisco, he's not going to look threatening because you're going to have skyscrapers that tower over him. And while he didn't like completely dwarf the biggest buildings in San Francisco, he at least looked imposing. And when you get into an animal that's 300 plus feet tall, they're going to be big because there's a lot of weight there to support, so there's going to be some bulk to them. I don't think he looked fat. He kind of reminded me, and then after I read this, after I'd seen the movie, I can see now why I had that thought. He kind of reminds me of like a bear because he's just like this big mass of just feral creature that's just huge and bulky, and when it hits you, well, I mean, us, we're like ants compared to Godzilla, but like when he hits these Mutos, there's going to be some impact there because he's just this big, massive creature. He did invoke a lot of the look of the old classic Godzilla that everybody's used to. And chances are, I mean, by now you've seen him. They showed him in the trailers. I mean, they didn't like plaster him all over the trailer, but I mean, he was in the trailer enough that you have a pretty solid idea what he looks like. And I thought the design was pretty, for this day and age, I thought the design was really well. If they would have went too far back to what he looked like in the old Toho movies, it would have looked cheesy. So for a monster movie coming out in 2014 with the technology we have and what the average person has as an expectation as to what a movie monster should look like, I thought it was both respectful to the source material and an upgrade to the design to make him look original but at the same time recognizable. And he's probably, I'm going to say, one of my favorite monster designs in the last few years. The movie won't be winning any Oscars, I'm sure, although I do think it should maybe be nominated for visual effects because the visual effects were really, really well done. But, overall it was a good flick. And I see a lot of people bitching, especially on IMDb, like they're like, "Oh, this movie's tanking. Look how fast the scores are going down. It went from a 9.2 to an 8.0." And this is why I hate numbered review scores, because an 8.0 is still a damn good review number. But I think a lot of people are just shitting on it because, well, it seems like the first and foremost, the biggest complaint is the amount of screen time Godzilla had. But to me, watching it, it almost seemed like first it's a singular experience. Like it's a self-contained story that if they don't make a sequel, it won't matter because the story was resolved. At the same time, it leaves it open that they could make sequels. So watching it, it almost kind of feels like a setup, like like an introduction to the lore of the character and the history of the creatures. They have, they don't have anything set in stone as to why he exists. They just have like characters giving out theories. Like I said, the theory was that they fed off the radiation that the planet gave off back in the primeval times. And I had a complete brain fart right there. um, and Godzilla's species was not hunted, but these Mutos used his species as hosts for their offspring and such. So, and there seems to be some confusion with why these creatures came out of dormancy. What I gathered from the way the characters were talking and some of the exposition that was given was that they could sense the radiation that like our nuclear power plants and everything gave off. The catalyst being the bomb being dropped on Hiroshima during World War II was what originally awakened Godzilla. But he wasn't like this big threat to humanity. He just they maybe dropped the ball on that a little bit because he wasn't like a direct threat to humanity. But they definitely played up this whole like nature's wrath type of thing and Godzilla's nature's way of restoring balance and blah blah blah. Which really, I mean, he wasn't really restoring the balance per se. He was just fucking up the Mutos because he didn't want them to come put their, offspring in them or whatever. Which then that doesn't make sense because later these Mutos, the female lays eggs in San Francisco. So I'm not real. I guess now that I think about it, that doesn't really make sense either because they kind of played it up that these things needed a host body because they found the original two spores in a skeleton of what I would assume would be another member of Godzilla's species. And they don't really say like if there's more Godzillas out there or anything like that, but then at the end of the movie these things are laying these eggs in San Francisco and there's nothing for them to. Well, never mind. That makes sense because they used a warhead to provide the radiation for the eggs, so they probably just used Godzilla's body for the radiation because he had residual radiation. Okay, never mind. That's probably how they hand waved that. But I would say if you have the chance, go see the movie because it is worth it. It's definitely worth it. It's not a cinematic masterpiece. Like I don't know. Like some people, I think they were expecting like a Braveheart type caliber of movie, and it's monsters beating the shit out of each other. It's going to be the heart of the movie, so I don't know what they were thinking. But if you liked Godzilla or if you like genre films like that, I don't think you'll be too disappointed. I think you'll at least enjoy the movie. Like I said, I mean, it's not a cinematic masterpiece or anything of that nature, but it's definitely worth the $8 or $10 or whatever ticket costs in your area to go see it and give it a chance. But and I would definitely like to see a sequel where they carry on with the monster and expand more upon this universe that they created in this first Godzilla film. And it's a hell of a lot better than the 1998 Godzilla, I'll say that. But it is what it is. It's like I said, the acting's really good, except for, like I said, Aaron Taylor Johnson was pretty stiff, and the visuals alone are well worth it. just for the big, when they finally do have the big monster on monster action, it's worth that build up to it. So like I said, if you get a chance, give it a shot. So I don't. Next week I'll probably get back into doing more of the like news and stuff that goes on during the week. Nothing really too exciting happened this week, at least that interests me. I did see that they dropped the Kinect from the Xbox 360 and they're going to sell it for, or not the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, and they're going to sell it for $399, which I think is a good thing. Because as I've stated in past videos, competition between the console manufacturers is definitely a good thing. The only people that are going to win are the gamers. And a single console future, I think, will be the death of innovation. So it's good to see some competition. Hopefully Sony gets out of their financial struggles and they can concentrate on the PlayStation brand and making it stronger. And Microsoft continues improving with what they're doing. They took a step in the right direction with this $399 Xbox One, and then I see they announced Halo 5, so they're starting to come out of the gate stronger. But I'm going to wrap this up. And like always, guys, I want to thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Let me know what you thought of Godzilla if you saw it.